Hello everybody, welcome back to Reaper Minis TV. Before we get into reviews for this episode, I've got a quick giveaway. I've got a set of the Zombie Mouslings that were available during the Reaper Artist Con in late October, close to Halloween time. And my understanding is that these were a limited edition set of miniatures that were released, so I've got a blister of them to give away to one of the subscribers of Reaper Minis TV. And that winner is WowAlex94. Alright, WowAlex94, you have until the 13th of November at, let's say, midnight Central Standard Time in the US to shoot an email to me at reapertv@tx.rr.com with your contact information, and I will mail out to you a still sealed blister of Zombie Mouslings, and in there you'll find 2 Zombie Mouslings and a Mousling hero that's wielding a chainsaw. So, thanks to WowAlex94 for being a subscriber, and to everybody else, we're going to have another Christmas giveaway coming up in December, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, and on to reviews. We're going to start off with some Dark Heaven Legends figures, and this first blister is a set of Mouslings. In here we find a Pirate, a Savage, and a Duelist. All 3 of these are single-piece miniatures, no assembly required, just a little bit of cleaning on each of them with a little bit of extra metal from the casting process, but very minor mold lines if you find them at all, so they all cleaned up relatively quickly. The Pirate is carrying a cutlass in his left hand, has a do-rag or bandana on his head, a nice big earring, and an eye patch. The Savage, or I would just go ahead and call him a Barbarian, is carrying a large axe, well, large for him anyway, up in his right hand, extended up sort of like in a heroic, hurrah kind of pose. He's very barrel-chested. I guess for a Mousling he's barrel-chested. He's got a necklace that looks like it's made of teeth around his neck. He's wearing a loincloth, very Conan the Mousling kind of barbarian look to him. And then you've got the Duelist, who is very reminiscent of a musketeer or mouseketeer, you could say. He's wielding an epée, or dueling sword, in his left hand. He's got the tabard on like you would expect a musketeer to have. Musketeer to have. He's got a feathered hat on and is in very much an on-guard kind of pose. All 3 of them are sculpted very nicely. They're very clean sculpts, and I have to admit the whole Mousling range that I've seen has started to grow on me so far. I do like them. I just don't know what in the world to use them for right now, if it's not for some kind of diorama or maybe to have my 8-year-old daughter start to paint, to start getting her into painting. So good figures. I just, again, don't know really what I'm going to use them for right now. Alright, the next blister is a set of Dark Heaven Legends Classics, and this is a blister pack of 3 Dark Elves. You get one that's carrying a 2-handed spear, one with a sword and shield, and another that is pretty obviously a cleric. She's carrying a mace in her right hand, and in her left hand she carries a skull that looks like it's either some kind of magic item or component for a spell that she's about to cast. The one carrying the sword and shield is the most obvious Dark Elf of the group, because you can see the spider web pattern, and there's also a spider on her shield, so very much in the regular theme of Dark Elves with that one. The cleric one could pass for another kind of elf maybe if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be a Dark Elf. And then the last one with the spear, I think you could probably drop in as any kind of elf and have a pretty workable character there. Since these are older sculpts, they're not done in the same style as the new Dark Reach Dark Elves for Warlord. They're obviously from a different line. These are from the Dark Heaven Legends. The Warlord Dark Reach ones are from the Warlord line. But since they are an older sculpt, an older style, I don't really think that you're going to drop them in together. You could, if you wanted to, don't get me wrong, but they don't necessarily just automatically go together just because they're Dark Elves. They do have a different look to them. Now, I do think I could drop the Cleric into my Warhammer Fantasy Dark Elf army as a spellcaster. Just a single miniature like that I think would look fine painted up to go with my army in the purple and black and kind of gold color that they have going on. So I think that one would be fine in my Dark Elf army. The rest of them, or just the whole pack as a whole, could be a good start to a Underdark encounter in D&D or anywhere else you need some Dark Elves. Alright, next up we have 2 female knights, a good knight and an evil knight, and like I said, they're both female, they're single-piece miniatures, both carrying a sword and shield, and they're also both in similar poses with the sword lifted up over their head and the shield sort of out in front of them to defend. And while one is labeled as a good knight and the other as an evil knight, I really don't see any reason that you couldn't paint up one or the other to be the opposite of what their labeling is. I think the evil knight, you could paint her up to be a very good representation of a paladin or some kind of good aligned fighter. and then on the good one, you could paint her up all black and red and evil looking and end up with an evil one. So I think both of them are good poses, good action-oriented kind of poses for female player characters. Both good models here. Our last Dark Heaven Legends blister to look at for this episode is Dorley Luckrock. He's a halfling scout, and he is just far and away one of my favorite miniatures that I have seen in a long time. Definitely my favorite of this batch for this episode, and I just love this little guy. There are two pieces that go into the putting together of the miniature. There is Dorley himself, or most of him, and then his rifle that is cast as a separate piece, but it's attached to the casting tab of the model itself. Over his left shoulder, you see he's carrying a bird that he's brought down, and in his right hand, he's going to be carrying his rifle. And you can see he's wearing pretty normal clothes and not really any adventuring gear. No armor, no extra weapons or anything like that. There's nothing about the miniature that screams out adventurer or anything like that, and that is precisely why I want to use him in that role. Even though there aren't halfling rules for the new edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay yet, I absolutely want to drop him into that game, still give him his rifle, and use him as a hunter or scout PC in my Warhammer campaign. And ultimately, if nobody wants to play halfling in the Warhammer campaign, I'm almost positive I'll use him as an NPC instead. So just awesome figure here. He's got a lot of character to him, especially the face. He's just a happy guy who's out hunting turkeys or whatever, and he gets caught up in the machinations of chaos in the old world. So definitely a winner here. Okay, moving into the Chronoscope line now, we have a blister that is the British Colonial Rifleman 2, which means that there is a number 1 set that we'll show you in just a second. But in this blister, you get 3 guys. They're all single-piece miniatures that are carrying, 2 of them are carrying rifles with the bayonets. One is carrying a pistol in his right hand and a saber in his left. And all of them have some extra pouches for gear and ammo and stuff like that. And each of the 3 needed a little bit of bending back straight when they came out of the blister. The 2 guys with the rifles and bayonets, those were bent in the blister, had to be carefully put back straight. And the guy with the saber, that was bent and had to be put back into just regular position there. Just be careful when you're doing it and you won't have any problems. And if you want to add these to the existing British Colonials in Reaper's Chronoscope line, there's a set of 3 other riflemen that you can pick up. You can see those right here. And there's also Colonel Edward Titchener, who's a British officer, that you can also add. So if you're looking to do a miniature reenactment of the movie Zulu, or you have another reason to get a bunch of British colonials, maybe for some pulp action kind of game, I think these would be fine for that. And last up for this episode are 2 new supervillains in the Chronoscope line. The first is named Lady Tiger, and it's a single-piece miniature. Reminds me an awful lot of Sabretooth from Marvel Comics, but a female version maybe of that supervillain. You can see that she's in a running forward pose, ready to pounce on somebody, and there's a bit of metal that runs down from about her right shin to the ground that you'll need to clip away. That's just there as part of the casting process. Otherwise, really not too much cleaning on the model. There was a mold line that was visible and a little bit of extra metal on her hair from the casting process, but nothing that didn't clean up in just about a minute or 2. Her pointed ears are visible poking up through her hair, so maybe not 100% suited to being a non-feline superhero or supervillain, but you probably could use her in that role if you needed to. But for a feline-based one, right on the spot here. And our last figure for this episode is the Harpy, another supervillain, and you can tell right away there's a definite lack of clothing on the miniature. If this bothers you, don't use the miniature. If it's not an issue for you, then it's not an issue for you, but I think if you're sort of on the fence about it, you could very easily paint up the miniature to be fully clothed and just make it not an issue. She comes in 2 pieces, with the main body of the miniature as one and then her wings as the second piece. The wings glue into the base, and you can see there's a definite amount of cleaning that's needed from the casting process down at the base end of the wings, but assembly is actually quite easy, went together without a problem. But you will need to spend several minutes just in general cleaning of the model to prep it and get it ready for assembly. And while she might not be a miniature for everybody, I happen to like it a lot, and outside of a supervillain application, I think she would make a great leader to a unit of Darkspawn Incubi in Warlord. Alright everybody, thanks for watching this episode of Reaper Minis TV. See you next time.